The Galactic Rescue Station orbiting Theta 7 had processed thousands of displaced species over the past decade, but nothing had prepared the staff for the incident with Rinner. The Cub had arrived 3 cycles ago, pulled from the wreckage of a civilian transport that had strayed too close to the contested zone. At first glance, Rinner appeared to be a typical Vexorian juvenile covered in silver-blue fur with distinctive, crystalline patches along his spine that would eventually harden into armor. His species was known throughout the galaxy for their warrior culture, their stoicism, and their fierce independence even from birth, which made what happened next all the more extraordinary. Kalis had been assigned to the xenobiology wing by accident, really. As one of only 3 humans working at the station, she'd been rotated through various departments as the administration tried to figure out where the newest addition to the galactic community could be most useful. Humans were still a curiosity. Their planet had only achieved faster-than-light travel 8 standard years ago, and their integration into galactic society remained a work in progress. "You'll be handling basic care duties," Shift Supervisor Kel9 had explained through his translator unit, his insectoid mandibles clicking with what might have been skepticism. "Feeding, cleaning, monitoring vitals, nothing complicated. Even a human should manage." Kalis had smiled politely and ignored the jab. She'd grown accustomed to the casual dismissiveness. Humans were soft, weak, short-lived by galactic standards. They lacked natural weapons, armor, or any of the specialized adaptations that made other species formidable. On a station filled with beings who could breathe methane, survive hard vacuum, or regenerate lost limbs, humanity seemed woefully inadequate. She'd approached Rinner's containment unit with simple efficiency. The Cub had been sedated for the journey, and the medical team projected he'd wake within the hour. Standard protocol dictated minimal interaction, keep the subject calm, fed, and stable until proper guardians could be located or foster arrangements made. But when Rinner's eyes had opened vast pools of amber that held far too much awareness for a creature barely 3 cycles into life, everything changed. The Cub had stared at Kalis for a long moment, his small body trembling. Then, without warning, he'd released a sound that made every being on the medical deck freeze. It wasn't quite a cry, not exactly a whimper, it was something primal, a distress call that resonated at frequencies the translators couldn't properly process. Kalis had moved on instinct. She deactivated the containment field and scooped Rinner into her arms, cradling him against her chest. The Cub's crystalline spines, still soft with youth, pressed against her uniform as he burrowed into her warmth. And then, miraculously, he'd stopped crying. Curious, Kel9 had observed from a safe distance. Vexorians typically reject physical contact during stress periods. Their young are conditioned for solitary resilience. But Rinner had only pressed closer to Kalis, small clawed hands gripping her sleeve, and within minutes had fallen into what the bioscanners confirmed was the deepest, most restful sleep he'd achieved since rescue. For the next 72 hours, Kalis became Rinner's constant companion. Where she went, the Cub followed, or more accurately, was carried. He refused to eat unless she prepared the nutrition paste. He wouldn't sleep unless he could hear her heartbeat. The one time a well-meaning Thularian nurse had attempted to take him for scheduled testing, Rinner's screams had shattered 3 observation windows and triggered hull breach protocols on 2 decks. The senior staff called an emergency meeting. "This is unacceptable," Administrator Vestal declared, her 3-chambered brain pulsing with agitation visible through her translucent skull. "We have proper Vexorian foster protocols. Cultural specialists. The Cub must be reassigned to appropriate caregivers who understand his species' needs." Kalis stood before the council, Rinner sleeping peacefully in her arms, his soft snores barely audible. "With respect, Administrator, perhaps what he needs isn't what the protocols suggest. Humans." Kel9's mandibles clicked with something that might have been amusement. "Always thinking they know better than established the science. Tell me, Specialist Kalis, what makes you qualified to override centuries of xenobiological research?" She'd considered her words carefully. "Nothing, Supervisor. I'm not qualified. But I am here, and I'm what he's chosen." The debate had raged for 2 standard hours. In the end, Administrator Vestal had ordered a trial separation. Rinner would be transferred to the Vexorian Cultural Unit, staffed by beings who actually understood his species' developmental needs. The separation lasted exactly 47 minutes. Rinner's screams could be heard across 6 decks. Bioscanners showed his stress hormones spiking to dangerous levels. His crystalline spines, which should have remained soft for another 3 standard months, began hardening prematurely, a trauma response that could permanently damage his development. The cultural specialists tried everything: traditional Vexorian lullabies, climate adjustment to match his homeworld, even pheromone therapy. Nothing worked. Rinner screamed until his voice gave out, then continued screaming silently, his small body convulsing with distress. It was Kalis who'd broken protocol, pushing past the guards and entering the cultural unit without authorization. The moment Rinner saw her, his silent screaming stopped. When she lifted him into her arms, he pressed his face against her neck and released a sound the translators finally managed to capture, a single word in the ancient Vexorian dialect that hadn't been spoken in generations. Mother. The room had fallen silent. Dr. Sean Keir, the station's chief xenopsychologist, had run every scan available. The results defied conventional understanding. Somehow, in those first moments of consciousness after trauma, Rinner had imprinted on Kalis with an intensity that transcended species boundaries. His developing neural pathways had literally rewired themselves around her presence. But why? Administrator Vestal had demanded. Why would a Vexorian cub, a species evolved for independence and isolation, bond so completely with a human? Dr. Sean Keir had displayed the scans with something that might have been wonder. Perhaps that's precisely why. Humans are unusual. They're social beyond any logical evolutionary advantage. They form attachments across species barriers that other races find incomprehensible. They adopt creatures that should be prey or predator and call them family. The doctor had gestured to Kalis, who sat in the corner with Rinner sleeping peacefully in her lap, her hand gently stroking his silver-blue fur. This human's heartbeat is steady, predictable. Her body temperature provides ideal warmth. Her movements are gentle, non-threatening. But more than that, she cares. Not as a protocol or duty, but as genuine emotional investment. Rinner's traumatized neural system recognized what it needed to survive, and it chose her. Impossible, Cal9 had muttered. Emotions aren't quantifiable. They can't override biological imperatives. Can't they? Dr. Shankir had tilted their head. How many times have we documented humans performing feats of impossible strength to save their young? Or sacrificing themselves for beings they've known mere cycles? They're weak by every physical metric. Yet, they've somehow built a civilization on the principle that caring for each other matters more than individual survival. The silence that followed held a weight Kalis could feel even across the room. In the end, Administrator Vestal had granted a provisional exception. Kalis would remain Rinner's primary caregiver under medical supervision, with regular evaluations to ensure the cub's development proceeded normally. 3 months later, those evaluations showed Rinner exceeding every developmental milestone for his age. His crystalline spines had returned to their proper growth rate. His cognitive assessments placed him in the top percentile for Vexorian juveniles. And every night without fail, he fell asleep in Kalis's lap, one small hand gripping her sleeve. The galaxy had thousands of species, each remarkable in their own right. But perhaps Dr. Shantir had noted in their final report, humanity's true strength wasn't in their bodies or their technology. It was in their stubborn, illogical, beautiful insistence that love could bridge any distance, survive any trauma, and transcend any difference. Even the distance between stars, even the difference between human and alien. Even when all logic said it should be impossible, humans would find a way to care. And sometimes, miraculously, the universe cared back.